Hello, my name is Gaynor and I have a Grace Q-Zone frame and it's got a Nina 1600p machine on it. In South Africa, the Nina 1600p is, for all intents and purposes, the same machine as a Janome 1600. So I have a large quilt loaded onto this frame, and I looked everywhere for videos on how to baste using this machine and this setup. And because the quilt is so large, we are advancing horizontally and vertically. So when we're actually quilting, if we don't baste this quilt down, we are going to end up with bunching not only on the bottom, but with the batting and also your quilt top. And I have done this actually on a smaller quilt, and I didn't baste it, and I had that exact problem. The reason being, these clamps here can often catch more fabric up into them. So when you're basting, your fabric, all your layers are being held down, which prevents you from having pieces of fabric being pulled up. Once I have clamped my quilt down, it's a good idea to look underneath and make sure that there's no folds or bumping, because often as well, when you clamp down with these, you can get, your backing can get sort of pleated in. So it's a good thing to just walk around and have a look underneath. So onto the machine, I am using a Grace speed controller. I have not tried this with the foot control. But I've played around a lot with tension. I have turned my top tension down. I turned it down to about a 3. I am back now to the standard setting that I would use for normal quilting, which is 4. If you find that this is still too tight for basting, by all means go down to about a 3. I found that it didn't really make that much of a difference. So what problems do we have basting this with this machine? I have broken numerous needles and torn my hair out and fiddled with different thread. And obviously I don't want to use my expensive glide or my Isacord for basting because it's a waste. So I tried some Cerulon, which is a South African brand. It's a poly cotton. But I found that it shred. So far I'm now using Gutermann poly, and it seems to be working okay. I'm not having too much issues with it. So when you are basting, you need to get into a rhythm. When the needle goes down, it goes up. Once the needle goes up, you move. Down, up, move. Down, up, move. Don't try and move the machine when the needle is down or on its way up. You will break a needle, because what's happening is the bobbin is holding your top thread, and then if you're not all the way up, it bends your needle and you will break it. So going back to what I said earlier, if you find that when you're moving your stitches, it's too tight and it's pulling, loosen your top tension. Don't play with your bobbin. I've had this machine recently serviced. They, in the factory, they got the tension absolutely 100% for quilting. So it's quilting beautifully, and I don't want to go and mess with my bobbin tension right now. Obviously, there are things called tower gauges, which you can go and Google, and you can put your bobbin in and with your different weights, threads. There's normally guides that the thread manufacturers will help you with in terms of where it should be on the tower gauge. But for now, I'm just going with the Gutermann, and that is what was in the machine when it went for service. So I haven't done a video on how to load a quilt On this frame, there are many videos on how to load, but sadly nothing on basting with this machine. So just to refresh, top tension is what you play with, and your speed is what you need to go right down to dead slow. Dead slow because you want to go very slowly doing this. This is not a quick process. The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to quilt. I'm going to baste down here. Now, a lot of people will use your normal stitch length down the sides. Sure, you can. Now I'm going to have to go and fiddle with my speed, and I'm going to have to fiddle with that top tension just to do a small line down here. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use a basting stitch, and I'll pull it out afterwards. I also prefer, I started basting with a thread that pretty much matched the quilt top, but I don't like doing that. I actually prefer the darker thread that I can see. It's going to be easier to pull out afterwards. So let's give this a go. If you have a look at my speed control, this is where it's currently set. It's very slow. Okay, so if you turn this down too low, the needle's not going to move at all, and you're going to think there's something wrong. So just, if that happens, just keep turning it. So turn it on. Just keep turning the dial until the needle starts to move, but it must be slow. Okay, so I've pulled my bottom thread up. Let's go. I'm not going to do any lock stitches. Again, this machine doesn't have a lock stitch, so we would have to do a lock stitch manually. But I'm just going to start now getting this done. You can see how slow this is. Okay, this is not a quick process. Okay, what I've done as well is I have rolled my quilt. So if you have a look here, this often lies back like this, and it takes up space in the throat of the machine right here. If I lift this up, all of a sudden now I have some extra space that allows me to quilt. Okay, so I could theoretically go a little bit further on this. I do have the space in the throat. I'm not going to. I'm happy with that. So I'm now going to baste across. So again, dead slow. Up, up, move, move, move. You can see every time the needle is up, I am moving. I never move when the machine's needle is in the down position. I just help the fabric behind because it wants to pull or push it this side. The foot wants to tend to push it that way, and I've noticed a lot of people with other machines also talking about it happening. And I'm not quilting very straight. It doesn't have to be straight. If you absolutely pedantic about this, you can put your channel locks on. I'm only basting. I'm not worried how straight it is. I'm just going. All right, and now I'm coming to the end. There we go. So I should have mentioned I'm using a standard 80 weight 8012 needle. It's just a universal needle. When I start my quilting, I will put a quilting needle in, but I broke so many needles. I played around with needles yesterday, and I just figured out that you've got to watch that needle as it goes down and it comes up. Once it's in the up, move, and then it's going to go down. So you've got a small amount of time to move it to the next space. How big are the stitches? Probably an inch in size. Okay, they're not all perfect. I don't have a stitch regulator on this machine, but you know, they're about an inch in size, which is perfect. So now I would need to advance this quilt. I'm not going to go into advancing left and right today, but I will leave the needle in the down position, take the clamps off, and move the machine and the quilt down. When you leave your needle in the down position, don't drag the quilt only. You're going to make a hole in your fabric. You need to move your machine and the quilt together. Clip it, make sure it's nice and tight. The other thing is that a lot of people that don't have Q-zone frames talk about is being able to grab a knuckle, and it mustn't be too tight, and people are probably going to say to me, oh, this is too tight. Well, that's another thing I played with. Q-zone frame works differently, and I had it much looser yesterday. How do you loosen? You can actually, when you put these on, so this is the early Q-zone, the newer ones have different clamps and a different. Can you see by moving these clamps underneath and just turning it, you now have a much looser top. Okay, that might work for you. It didn't work for me yesterday when I was trying to baste this. For me, it worked better tight. That's just how it works for me. I've put my leader cloth on here with my clamps because when I started, I wanted to be able to get nice and close to the edge here. Immediately I put clamps on here alone, then my machine wants to get caught on the clamps, because remember, these machines are quite wide, whereas a long arm is narrow. So with this machine, you can't get as close to your clamps, so the leader cloth works quite well with the clamps on. So that's all for today. Like and subscribe, and I'll post more videos on my quilting on my Q-zone with my Nina.